Imagine a world where your every thought, emotion, and action is fuel for an invisible machine, a system that thrives on chaos, noise, and perpetual motion. Now picture what happens when you stop, when you become still, silent. That's the silence code, the ultimate glitch in the matrix. It's not about quieting the world around you, it's about silencing the storm within, and in doing so, starving the very forces that bind you. The matrix doesn't fear your rebellion, it fears your stillness, because in that void, you rediscover your sovereignty. Imagine a room with no notifications, no hum of traffic, no playlist, just a small, steady presence of your breath. In that room, thought loosens its hold. Reactions arrive slower. You notice a gap between stimulus and response. For billions of people living in the attention economy, that gap is the most dangerous thing. It is the place where the matrix, the system of attention capture and control, can no longer predict you. This is the silence code, why structures of power, profit, and habit fear you becoming still. Today we will do three things. First, trace the idea historically and culturally, why silence has always been treated as spiritually dangerous and politically powerful. Second, dig into modern science, what silence and stillness actually do to the brain and body, including research on neurogenesis, network connectivity, and cognitive control. I'll flag the strongest studies so you can verify them. Third, analyze the social and political implications, how attention economies, propaganda systems, and platforms respond to stillness, and why silence becomes a form of resistance. Why the matrix, that simulated prison of reality, dreads your inner peace, and practical steps to activate it. I'll end with practical steps, specific, evidence-based practices for developing inner stillness that are resistant to co-optation, plus how to structure public and personal quiet in a world designed to be loud. If you're ready to unplug, like, subscribe, and hit notifications. Let's decode the silence in the long human story. The silence code isn't a secret password or a hidden algorithm in some sci-fi script. It's the profound realization that stillness, true inner quietude, disrupts the matrix control grid. In esoteric terms, the matrix is a loosh harvesting farm, feeding off human emotional energy, fear, anger, desire. When you become still, you stop generating that energy. You cease being a battery. Humans have always treated silence as catalytic. Across traditions, quiet is either a doorway to the divine or the doorway that reveals the systems that keep you asleep. In the Christian contemplative tradition, hesychasm trained monks to cultivate unbroken inner silence, a practice considered both dangerous and liberating because it stripped away comfortable identities. In Sufism, the silence of the heart opens direct experience. In Tibetan Buddhism, the silence of shamatha or dzogchen is a deliberate technology for seeing through the dream. Why the ambivalence? Because silence removes external narrative scaffolding. In silence, the stories we tell ourselves about status, fear, virtue, scarcity lose their immediate force. That is spiritual freedom. It's also political. A person who can sit still and feel their own mind is harder to herd, harder to radicalize, and harder to keep emotionally reactive. You might think silence is simply the absence of sound. That's wrong, and modern science shows it. Silence registers in the nervous system as an event. Studies show that the brain processes silence in ways similar to sound. It is an input, not merely an absence. In animal models, exposure to silence has produced measurable changes in the hippocampus, increases in neurogenesis compared with other auditory conditions. In short, silence can literally change the brain's architecture. That finding is consequential. If silence can promote new neuron growth and sharpen attentional systems, it is not an optional luxury. It is a biological nutrient for clarity and cognitive resilience. News outlets and public reporting have picked up this idea. Recent science coverage has emphasized that even brief silence can reduce stress and that the brain treats silence as an active signal to attend. What stillness does to networks, DMN, CEN, and the control systems. Neuroscience has a vocabulary for networks. The default mode network, DMN, where mind-wandering, self-referential thought and rumination live. The Central Executive Network, CEN, which enables focused, goal-directed action, and the Salience Network, which detects what matters now. Meditation and sustained stillness shift activity and connectivity across these networks. Long-term meditators show reduced activity in the DMN and different coupling patterns between these networks, changes associated with better attention regulation and reduced mind wandering. Becoming still trains your brain to notice when you're being pulled by distractions. That pause before reacting is the heart of your agency. Silence and contemplative practice don't only change momentary activity, they correlate with microstructural brain differences. Studies of people who intentionally cultivate silence, retreatants, long-term meditators, show white matter and microstructural changes associated with attentional efficiency and reduced effort in sustaining attention. In other words, stillness trains the brain's hardware to be more efficient at quiet, focused states. Silence changes brain structure, leading to microstructural differences. Studies show that stillness enhances attentional efficiency and focus. Stillness can make you more receptive, but it can also leave you vulnerable. A paradox. Some research suggests that certain meditative states increase openness or suggestibility, a trait that in one context can facilitate compassion and learning, and in another can leave someone vulnerable to coaching, hypnotic suggestion, or charismatic influence. Studies exploring the relationship between mindfulness and hypnotizability find complex, mixed results. Mindfulness and hypnotic suggestibility share attentional phenomenology but are not identical. In an attention. Put plainly, silence can make you more receptive, and that receptivity can be used for healing or manipulation depending on context and intention. This is why ethical teachers emphasize lineage, safeguards, and discernment around deep practices. The attention economy, why stillness is a threat. Now let's move from brain circuits to social systems. The dominant economic model for the last 2 decades is an attention economy. Platforms monetize attention. The more reactive, the more ad revenue and data. Machine learning systems optimize for engagement signals, outrage, novelty, and emotional reactivity. Stillness interferes with this pipeline. A person who can sit quietly, observe their reactions, and choose where to put attention is a low-value user in the metrics that drive profit. We see practical responses. Platforms push features that fragment attention. Infinite scroll, short-form loops, algorithmic feeds, push notifications. Corporate UX designs not only aim to increase time on platform, they often weaponize unpredictability to elevate dopamine-driven loops. If stillness reduces your susceptibility to those loops, then corporate incentives will be aligned against it, or at least indifferent. But beware, silence can be commodified and sold back to you. Practice with discernment to ensure your stillness is genuine. Beyond commerce, silence has political implications. Authoritarian regimes historically fill public space with noise, rallies, parades, radio, not because sound itself controls, but because shared noise substitutes for public reflection and local dissent. In contrast, quiet pockets have provided the space for organizing, prayer, reading samizdat, and dissent. There's a pattern. Controlling attention and sensory environment helps control narrative. At scale, modern information systems can drown stillness in 1,000 curated voices. That's why contemplatives sometimes describe stillness as a clandestine revolution. It undermines the infrastructure of mass narrative control by creating moments where the self is not reflexively aligned with the loud chorus. The Matrix fears stillness, a cultural narrative. Silence is dangerous to the system because stillness allows you to see the code. Creators frame silence as a political weapon, a way of stepping out of reactive cycles and reclaiming agency. There are countless guided stillness practices and essays framed explicitly as resistance. Representative content, both secular and spiritual, reinforces the cultural idea that stillness is subversive. This narrative is partially true, partly metaphoric, and partly aspirational. It warns against complacency. Stillness can free you, but it can also be co-opted into a brand, into a self-improvement checklist, or into passivity that ignores systemic change. Let's discuss how silence gets sold back to you. The attention economy is adaptive. It doesn't simply keep you noisy, it repackages silence into consumable goods. An app that sells 1-minute silence, a brand that trademarked quiet retreats, influencers who sell curated silence's lifestyle. That commodification neutralizes a practice's edge. Once stillness is a product, the system has absorbed it. If your practice begins on an app designed to sell ads, ask how comfortable you are with outsourcing quiet to a platform whose incentives are misaligned with your inner life. Silence is a powerful tool, but it requires discernment. Practice with intention. Accountability, integration, grounding, and education are key. Because silence increases receptivity, ethical practice matters. Simple safeguards. 1. Practice with teachers or peer groups that discourage cultish dynamics. 2. Integration. Combine solitude with community service and real-world engagement. 3. Grounding. Balance silent retreats with movement, practices, and check-ins. 4. Learn the social and psychological dynamics of influence so you're not naive about persuasion tactics. Case studies show how stillness can transform communities and workplaces. Let's look at 2 concise case studies. Case A. The Community Quiet Hour, a neighborhood center, introduced a daily hour of silence. No phones, no announcements. Over 6 months, volunteerism and local civic participation rose. People reported clearer decision-making and less reactivity in community meetings. The stillness allowed slower thinking and deeper listening. Case B. The Mindful Union Campaign. A labor campaign embedded mindfulness sessions before strategy meetings. Workers reported reduced impulsive reactivity during negotiations, enabling more strategic, coordinated actions. While correlation is not causation, participants credited stillness with improved collective clarity. Micro-silence training and weekly silent blocks can build resilience. Remember, stillness should never lead to passivity. It must fuel ethical action. Stillness reduces predictability, giving you agency against manipulation. Start small. 3 90-second checks a day can change everything. Here are field-tested protocols drawn from contemplative traditions, neuroscience, and civic practice. Micro-silence training 3x day. Start with 3 90-second stillness checks. Breathe, notice, return to task. Short reps build a pause reflex, accessible during high arousal moments. Weekly silent block. Schedule 1 30-60-minute block each week free from devices. Treat it like a meeting with your own attention. Integrative social silence. Host monthly silent meetings where group members sit for minutes before discussion. This stabilizes group dynamics and reduces performative reactivity. Turn off non-essential notifications during deep work and rest windows. Replace scrolling with reading or walking. Learn basic persuasion techniques, priming, framing, social proof, so you can recognize manipulative content and name it. Combined, these protocols train both the nervous system and the social environment to protect stillness from commercial capture. Some 5 most important scientific claims to keep in mind. 1. Silence can promote neurogenesis in animal models. Hippocampal precursor proliferation compared with other auditory conditions. 2. Meditation and sustained stillness are associated with reduced default mode, mind-wandering activity, and altered network connectivity that support improved attention and reduced rumination. 3. Stillness practice correlates with microstructural brain changes, white matter and microstructural differences, linked to attentional efficiency. 4. The relationship between mindfulness and suggestibility/hypnotizability is complex. Mindfulness changes attention and openness, which can increase receptivity in ways that are therapeutically valuable but also require safeguards. 5. Popular media and platforms amplify the narrative that stillness is a form of power/resistance. There are many large audience pieces, guided sessions, essays, and videos framing stillness as liberation. There is a seductive error we must avoid: treating stillness as an excuse for disengagement. The matrix, whether you define it as corporate capitalism, authoritarian politics, or mass psychology, is defeated not by individual silence alone, but by collective clarity and ethical action. Silence without responsibility can be a luxury that enables selective compassion or quiet withdrawal while injustice continue. So pair inner stillness with outer work, community care, civic engagement, and accountability structures. The power of silence is greatest when it feeds ethical action. Why the Matrix fears you becoming still? Because stillness reduces predictability. A still mind is less exploitable by attention architectures. Stillness creates a decision gap that dissolves reactive monetizable behaviors. It fosters clarity that undercuts propaganda and cultivates mental infrastructure for ethical choice. In short, predictability equals profit and control. Stillness equals agency, and that agency is antithetical to systems built on extracting attention. If you took one thing from this video, let it be this. Stillness is a practice with measurable brain effects and social consequences. It can be a personal refuge and a civic technology. Share your experience in the comments, and we'll read selected reports in a follow-up episode.